What's going on, everybody? Sam Shapiro back here with more of your Heat latest on Fan Arc. Don't forget to drop a like on this video, and of course, subscribe to our channel for great daily content, all pertaining to Miami Heat right here, Monday through Friday. Another update regarding the injury report for Miami as the tip-off for the regular season for Miami going underway tonight against the Orlando Magic at 7 o'clock. Kel'el Ware looks like he's going to, at least at this point in time, be a game time decision. Now listed as questionable with a left ankle sprain that he suffered in practice yesterday. And if Kel'el Ware is going to be sidelined, especially from this tip off game, this could be catastrophic, in my opinion, for Miami's front court. Having a piece like Ware coming off the bench, well, at least that's one bright side. At least the starting five is not really going to take a toll. Having Bam and Jovic starting for Miami in this game definitely is not the worst case scenario, at least considering that was I feel like the planned scenario going into this game, even with Ware coming off the bench. But having a dominant scorer like that sitting out in this first game is definitely going to be awful for Miami. It was already not great that Yaku Chones was going to be sidelined, I believe, because of a groin injury as well. So I was excited to see what the rookie could at least bring to the table in the first game, but we kind of already knew that wasn't going to be the case going into this game. And it was going to be exciting to see if Kel'el Ware could at least come out into the first game of this season and really pack a punch for this Miami offense, or really on both sides of the ball. But now it looks like we're going to have to wait a little bit, and that could be postponed. We'll just kind of have to wait and see how the developments with his ankle injury come through, and hopefully in a couple hours, or maybe at the time this episode's airing, we'll know already if Ware is going to be good to go and if this ankle injury is nothing serious that we necessarily need to be worried about. But at least at this point in time, it seems like Ware is going to be a game time decision for tonight's season opener for Miami, and it would definitely be catastrophic, I think, for Miami's front court if this means he's going to be out for a couple games and extended time as well. Like I said, Ware is definitely much needed depth, especially off the bench, and having a player with the ceiling of caliber, or the caliber type of player he really is on both sides of the ball, the ceiling he could potentially play at this season, definitely going to be another major hit for Miami's front court and really just the team's overall play. But thankfully, starting five not going to be taking at least much of a hit, at least that core starting five that I had mentioned, I believe, in last episode of Mitchell, Powell, Wiggins, Jovic, and Bam all starting for Miami is still going to be intact, at least for this game. But having a piece like Ware coming off the bench is definitely what is going to separate Miami in this game. And if he can't play, it's definitely going to be rather unfortunate, to say the least. Now, a hypothetical scenario I wanted to kind of dive into, at least for the rest of this episode, was potential superstars that Miami could potentially line up to have a good, or at least set up for a good long-term deal in terms of bringing in a superstar, not I wouldn't say next season at all, but definitely in either 2027 or more like 2028, maybe even towards 2029. I feel like Miami has really tried to, at least with the Jimmy Butler experiment, with the Big Three experiment, and then obviously drafting Wade in 03, has always kind of tried to center their team around a superstar type player, and has maybe taken a couple years here and there to kind of excluding D Wade a little bit, because his scenario I feel like was different in comparison to LeBron and Jimmy Butler. Whereas you kind of, at least in Wade's scenario, they drafted D Wade, but then eventually acquiring guys like Alonzo Mourning and Shaquille O'Neal to complement Wade's play definitely set Miami on the right track to bring the franchise home their first title. But then also, at least with the Big Three, you kind of had pieces like Udonis Haslem still hanging around a little bit. Mario Chalmers, at least a starting point guard quality type of player. And then also having guys like Shane Battier, Mike Miller, and then adding on guys like Norris Cole and Birdman, Chris Anderson down the line definitely helped complement that team especially. But even looking at the Jimmy Butler scenario, really bolstering homegrown talent, trying to bring in guys like Gabe Vincent, Kendrick Nunn, Max Strus, having guys to really be a solid supporting cast for a free agent guy like Jimmy Butler. And it really did set him up to potentially kind of be on that threshold of potentially being a superstar type of player. But granted, Butler didn't really get the last laugh in either scenario that he was able to take Miami to the NBA Finals. The first one having to go up against LeBron himself, and then the next one going up against Jovic, two higher caliber superstar type players, which is why I feel like that experiment ultimately didn't work out. But I feel like now this Miami team that we're kind of looking at, especially, could really be setting the stage for potentially bringing in a new superstar type of player like that in years to come, even if it means they have to kind of take a backseat for a while. I'm not saying they're necessarily tanking, but I definitely think they're acquiring solid players. If you're looking at a 2K scheme or in the 2K realm of things, players that would kind of fluctuate in between that 75 to 80 overall range that can do a couple things very well, or is really just have quality game in terms of their overall play on both sides of the ball. I think Myron Gardner is one of these types of pieces. I think Nikola Jovic is a great example of one of these pieces. I think Jaime Jaquez Jr. could develop into one of these types of pieces, but hasn't really shown signs of it yet. But I think they're kind of setting the stage for another superstar type player to potentially come in either 2027 or 2028 to really set the stage and take advantage of those pieces kind of built around them already, and then the team kind of conforming to potentially what they could be later down the line. And I think there are three players at least over the next 2 or 3 years that Miami is definitely keeping tabs on to see how they can potentially maybe save up some money to try to, punch one of those players being the franchise cornerstone, even if it means having to part ways with a guy like Tyler or Bam, or maybe even both pieces, depending on what that price tag is going to look at least at this point in time. And the first one that I definitely want to mention right now is Nikola Jokic. He is going to potentially be available for some sort of deal, I believe in around the 2028 season when his current deal expires with the Nuggets. After that 2027-28 year, I believe he would be an unrestricted free agent. So I think Miami definitely keeping tabs on signing the generational center, who I believe would be 33 at the time when he is an unrestricted free agent, assuming he opts out of that player option, I believe, the year before. So, and I mean, when you're kind of just looking at the pay stubs, he's going to be making, on average, over the course of the next 3 years, at least 160 mil over the next 3 years of the current contract he's on. So just thinking about what Miami would potentially offer him, I feel like in general, Miami giving out 4 5-year contracts for close to $200 million. They're a little bit stingy with giving out deals like that because they want to see what other talent they could potentially plug and play in, at least with some of those pieces. So it'd be interesting to see what they would be willing to pay Nikola Jokic, obviously one of the greatest centers I feel like we've seen of all time, just because you factor in that passing ability with the superstar center numbers he's already kind of putting up, at least in terms of crashing the boards and putting the ball in the basket. So I think if it really came down to it, if Miami had to, maybe part ways with Bam Adebayo just to make some room for having a guy like Jokic come in and be the centerpiece of this Miami team, but really being a superstar, that could maybe be worth Miami's bang for their buck, at least in the long run. I think if you at least had, but in some scenarios, if you were able to part ways with Tyler, assuming that he's going to want kind of around at least that amount of money that Jokic is going to get paid over the next 2-3 years on this current deal he's on, that also could definitely be worth it too. I just think that Miami would benefit having a super, or at least an all-star level player, at least on the other side of the court, in conjunction with a player like Nikola Jokic. So if you were to come down to it, if you were to bring in a guy like Jokic, you'd probably want Tyler on that side of the ball as well. But then also considering the defensive liability you're giving up when you're also thinking about giving up Bam Adebayo could definitely raise some question marks, and having both of those guys in Miami's front court would definitely solidify at least how that team would look, especially if you had Kel'el Ware coming off the bench as well, assuming he doesn't necessarily develop into a player that would acquire having to, bark up a lot more money as well. But drop in the comments if you think Miami could be setting a solid stage to pick up a guy like Nikola Jokic, at least at this point in time, because I think pairing up a guy like Jovic, Jaime Jaquez Jr., if Powell decides to stick around for the long haul, and then even having a guy like Yaku Chones, who could be a great facilitator in that role, are very solid complementary pieces that you could build around acquiring a superstar like Jokic and the position he could fill, at least on Miami's current roster, is the way we look at it right now. But obviously, things could also change in the course of a couple years if these seasons don't necessarily pan out. Miami could definitely use some of those draft picks to potentially bolster some of the areas in the team that would also kind of have a weakness. But I want to kind of get into the next two players that I think Miami could kind of be setting the stage for in this regard. And the next one I want to mention is Giannis Antetokounmpo, being another one of those players that Miami could potentially, really build around in the grand scheme of things. And I think he kind of fills a little bit of a similar role to Jokic in that regard, because you could kind of move Bam down to the 5 depending on what scenario you kind of want to play. But I would rather kind of see Tyler Herro, Giannis Antetokounmpo, and then Kel'el Ware still be there at the 5 if it meant kind of parting ways with Adebayo. Granted, I'm not saying Miami should really consider. It's interesting because I think that in terms of defensively what he offers for this team, Miami needs his defensive play right now more than ever because of the liability that Herro is. But if you're flip-flopping that out with a guy like Giannis, who's also an all-defensive NBA player as well, with superstar level talent that is also an NBA champion, that also could be a great recipe for success. And I could definitely see that team with some of the current pieces they have at least going right now, really pairing up well for a finals run for that Miami team. So drop in the comments if maybe Giannis would also be a better player to kind of plug in to maybe complement at least a guy like Tyler Herro or Norman Powell in the backcourt. And then on the back end, having Ware potentially develop into an all-star type of center could really bolster a complete roster for Miami, but also give them that superstar player they really need to build around, assuming that Miami could maybe beat the Knicks out this go-around in the sweepstakes, because the Knicks couldn't potentially get it done over the course of this summer. And then a final player that I kind of wanted, a superstar caliber player that I think could potentially make some noise in terms of being a future superstar that Miami could build around, at least around 2028 or 2029, that final player being Luka Doncic. I think that would also be an interesting experiment, because Luka Doncic, I feel like, really has kind of established himself as really a point forward, really kind of thriving the most at that point guard position. But then that would also kind of give Miami a little bit more leeway in parting ways with Tyler Herro, who kind of wants to see the money, I feel like, that Doncic has just seen on this extension that he had signed with the Lakers, upward towards 180 mil plus. So when you kind of complement Luka with some of these pieces that Miami at least currently has, potentially getting some guys in the draft over those coming years, and then you have Bam and Ware in that front court, that team also looks pretty sick too. And you could build that team around Luka Doncic, and then assuming Ware can also improve defensively as well, I think that really increases the ceiling for what Miami could try to at least bolster in centering a team around a superstar player like Luka Doncic. So drop in the comments if any of those three all-stars would really bolster a solid case for Miami kind of at least tanking in the financial department to maybe save up money and just acquire some decent bench, borderline starter caliber assets to bring in a superstar player to build their next team around in hopes of them potentially making a finals run in the near future. But that's going to do it for today's episode of your Heat Latest here on FanArc. Don't forget to drop a like on this video and, of course, subscribe to our channel for great daily content all pertaining to your Miami Heat right here. Thanks so much for joining us on this Wednesday. I'm Sam Shapiro. Get excited for the tip-off of Heat season tonight against the Magic at 7. Hoping that Kel'el Ware plays, but right now I would say it's kind of questionable if he's going to suit up at least for this game. So hoping that he can at least make a steady recovery, and we'll just kind of have to wait and see what the timeline of that looks coming up. But that's going to do it for today's episode. Thanks again for joining us. I'm Sam Shapiro. Have a great day.